Springtime in the heartland, and a very different planting season is getting underway.
If you had to put it in a word, what has it felt like watching this all play out?
Unsettled would be my word.
Yeah.
Kevin Malchine's family has been farming this Wisconsin land since before the Civil War.
While elsewhere, small business owners are welcoming the tariffs as a potentially good thing for their bottom line. We traveled to Wisconsin to hear from farmers and to South Carolina to hear from fishermen. How did they feel about Trump's 100 days, and how will these tariffs affect them?
Growing up with it,
Yeah.
and seeing the stresses of my grandpa and my dad help prepare the mindset that I think I need to have.
Well, 6 generations of wisdom.
Yeah, it helps.
What if I told you that a single policy decision made $27 billion vanish from U.S. farms in just 60 days? Crops rotting, contracts evaporating, and China pulling out faster than your ex at commitment. Stay tuned to find out how this trade war made America First feel more like America Worst for farmers. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
But in his first 100 days, there has been real concern about the impact of his trade war and the tariff whiplash. According to our ABC News Washington Post Ipsos poll, 53% of Americans say the economy has gotten worse. The president there adamant his policies will pay off. Voters across the country have consistently rated the economy as the #1 issue. Trump's promises to lower costs and boost growth, helping to propel him to the White House since Trump took office. And 72% say it's very or somewhat likely Trump's economic policies will cause a recession. And tonight, the impact of Trump's tariffs is being felt in the heartland. Farmers who rely on China to purchase their soybeans now concerned.
Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your entire career, everything you'd built for decades, had just disappeared into thin air. Not because of a bad harvest, not because of a natural disaster, but because someone in Washington decided to throw down a tariff and then followed it up with a tweet. For American farmers, this wasn't some hypothetical nightmare, it became their reality.
It feels like tariffs are a little bit harder to deal with because it's entirely out of our control.
Like most farms in America, most of the soybeans grown here are ultimately bought by China.
He's no stranger to adversity.
We deal with floods and droughts and too hot, too cold, insects, weeds, all those things. But there's things that you can do to mitigate some of those risk factors.
Trade war, many farmers are now bracing to have to figure out who else will buy their crops.
China buys more American soybeans than any other country.
The nation produces a little bit over 4 billion bushel of soybeans.
March 4th, 2025 set the stage. That was the day the U.S. slapped a 25% tariff on Chinese steel and aluminum imports. But here's the kicker. This wasn't your classic trade war tit for tat. China wasn't about to just roll over on this one. If you thought these tariffs were going to stay in their lane, think again. China responded by going straight for the jugular, slapping a punishing 34% tariff on agricultural goods, refusing to grant import licenses to America's biggest exporters. You had farmers from Kansas to Nebraska watching their crops rot.
The president has placed a staggering 145% tariff on all Chinese products entering the U.S. In response, China placing a 125% tariff on all American goods, including soybeans.
I think it was 42% last year were sold to China.
42%.
Yeah.
All told, China paid nearly $13 billion last year to American farmers like Kevin.
Sorghum that was headed for China stopped dead in its tracks. Soybeans, what felt like the bread and butter of farming exports, immediately lost their biggest customer. Ports that once buzzed with activity became eerie, like watching a ghost town spread across America's agricultural heartland. Now, why sorghum, soybeans, and pork? This was China strategically playing chess, not checkers. They knew what U.S. farmers relied on most, and those were the very products they hit hardest. With buyers pulling out overnight, the numbers fell fast and hard. Sorghum exports to China, a $1 billion market, dropped by a brutal 95% in just 2 months. For those small family farms built on razor-thin margins, this wasn't just a setback, it was game over. But it wasn't just about the crops. It was trust. A trust in a global market system that suddenly seemed unreliable. Even buyers from countries like Mexico and Vietnam started looking elsewhere. Chaos doesn't exactly scream, "Invest here." And it all backfired. Painfully so. All those promises of America first? For farmers, it turned out to be more of an America figure-it-out-yourself situation. What if I told you that while Washington was stumbling through a trade war, China wasn't even in the same game? They were playing 4D chess. From the start, China saw the U.S. agricultural sector for what it was, a weak spot. American farmers relied on Chinese buyers to stay afloat, and Beijing had no problem exploiting that dependency. But here's the twist. They didn't stop at pulling away. They found new partners and made sure the U.S. wouldn't get back in the door. Once the tariffs hit and chaos unfolded, China didn't sit around feeling sorry for its soybean shortage. They picked up the phone and signed long-term trade deals with Brazil and Argentina. In a matter of months, they had secure pipelines for the same products they used to buy from the U.S. soybeans covered. Pork handled, wheat not even on their radar anymore. Meanwhile, American farmers watched soybean futures collapse by 30% like a bad stock market crash, and wheat, normally a staple export, had one of its worst sales weeks on record. Even traditionally reliable buyers like South Korea and the Philippines started drifting towards sellers like Australia and Russia. Why? Nobody wants to buy from someone neck-deep in trade drama. This wasn't China flying by the seat of its pants. Their strategy was calculated: turn the U.S. agricultural sector into a trade liability, diversify their supply chain, and make sure nothing like this could trap them again. Beijing didn't just adapt, they thrived. And Washington? They were busy assuming China would just wait it out until the tariffs got lifted. Joke's on them. By the time the U.S. realized China had locked itself into new trade relationships, the damage was locked in too. It wasn't just about the billions in lost sales. What these trade tensions really revealed was how vulnerable the U.S. agricultural economy had become, dependent on a single buyer. And whatever Washington's plan was, it sure didn't involve helping farmers pick up the pieces. That's where things took an even darker turn. The trade war didn't just rattle markets. It exposed just how fragile America's agricultural economy really is. Losing $27 billion in 2 months isn't just a financial blow. It's a lesson in putting all your eggs, or in this case crops, in one basket. Farmers weren't just up against tariffs. They were caught in the crossfire of a geopolitical tug-of-war. And while China found new partners in record time, the U.S. was left scrambling. So, what happens now? Can American farmers rebuild trust in global markets? Or has this changed the way the world sees U.S. agriculture forever? Only time will tell.